Okay, I'll call to order the April 4th, 2022 regular meeting of the Haywood County Board of Commissioners, and we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Pastor Josh Frazier to come forward for the invocation. So if everyone please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. God in heaven, we do thank you for the country that we live in. We thank you for the many blessings therein that comes with being in such a great place, such a great country, a great state, and this great county. We thank you for that also. Thank you for our commissioners, each one of them putting in the hard work to make sure that our county has exactly what it needs. I pray that you would give them wisdom and guidance in all that they do and all the decisions that are being made. In this room, Lord, there are several people that will be presenting different things today, and I pray that you would give them the words to say, and I pray that you would allow them to be able to present the information so that we as a county can make the right decisions together. We thank you for all the many blessings that we receive. Again, we pray for wisdom and guidance in this meeting today. In your name we pray. Amen.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Josh. We've got a new sound system, if y'all have noticed that. I don't know, some of you. So Joey's back there fine-tuning it. So it sounds good from here, Joey. And today's a good day. Carolina is playing for the championship tonight. By the time most people watch this, it'll probably already be over, but who would have ever thought that? So anyway, had to make that comment. Our next order of business is public hearing, and we do not have any today. And then next order of business is our public comment session, and I'll only have one person signed up to speak. And if you would limit your comments to 3 minutes, and Tracy will be keeping time, and she'll let you know if you would just conclude your comments after your 3 minutes. Our first person, or the only person signed up to speak, is Eric Overholtz. Welcome.
Morning, my name is Eric Overholtz. I live at 26 Davis Lane in Waynesville. And let me just echo your comments regarding the sound system. We'll say sitting back there, it is much better. It's long overdue. It does sound a lot better. I attended the special hearing that you guys had on March 24th to hear the presentations from the two different architectural firms on the plans for building a proposed new jail annex. I was truly hopeful that finally we might have some specific definitive plans on moving forward on a project that has been long overdue. Overcrowding in the jail is not a new issue. It's something that has been going on for at least a decade. Sadly, I have to say, I was greatly disappointed after the hearing, and I remain astounded at the lack of progress made since Sheriff Christopher presented his needs analysis results going back to November of 2020. You, the commissioners, have had 16 months to act since then. Yet March 24th, 2022 was the first time that you've spoken publicly to either of these firms. The 2-hour-long presentations were more of what you'd expect after maybe a month into the process, not 16 months. And it mostly dwelt on the company's histories with other projects and really only a cursory overview of what might work. And the level of questioning from commissioners made it quite painfully apparent to me that on this important public safety issue, your amount of research was actually quite minimal. I felt like a teacher watching students stumble over book report presentations, knowing quite well that nobody ever really read the book. Frustrated by any meaningful progress, I approached the sheriff and his officials and asked for more specifics. Namely, were they opting for a more traditional jail design or a more modern direct supervision facility? And I was equally flabbergasted that at this juncture, they still don't know. They did cite some staffing concerns, which are legitimate, but depending on which type of jail you opt for, it will have great implications for architectural design, capital expenditures, operations, staffing, and cost. And we still don't have clearance on the right-of-way, on the railroad. There's perception, and then there's reality. The perception is being put forth in the Mountaineer is that you could have the jail annex up and running by October of 2024. The reality is that you'll be nowhere near being close to being finished by that date. You know it, I know it, I think the community knows it. Could it just be that you're playing a political angle by making a decision just now, simply to take the heat off yourselves for these inexplicable delays?
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board this morning? Okay. I'll close the public comment session and move on to constituent concerns. Jennifer, can I start with you this morning? Do you have any?
No.
Okay. Kirk, do you have any?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Okay. Brandon, you have?
I had a few, but got with Mr. Moorhead and took care of it.
Okay.
Nothing lingering.
Nothing lingering? Okay. All right, good.
Took care of it.
Okay. Okay, our next order of business is our administrative agency reports and presentations. And the first one will be Haywood County Community Development Council, Acting Council President Mike Mclean. Welcome, Mike. If you would, Mike, just speak into the microphone, and you can pull it down. There you go.
Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for the time to present today. We've had a lot of activity in Haywood County over the years, originated with the community clubs. The community clubs is a vital part of the Haywood. I did some research in the Historical Society, and back in the early 60s, we had about 50 community clubs, homemaker clubs, and so the needs of the rural areas, the needs of the communities is something that has come to be with an ongoing heartfelt concern from all the people that are in the community club. We formed a new officer group for the council, Haywood County Community Development Council. Due to COVID, due to the last few years of officers moving on to other things, it has not been an active council. But what we found is that there is a need for a council to oversee the community clubs and speak as a voice to government, to speak as a voice within themselves, to share information between the clubs. So in November of last year, Bill Skelton worked with Karen Hammond and I, which were the only two active members of the council, to call a meeting. We called all the community clubs together. They were invited to bring their president as well as bring the another member with them to speak whether the Community Development Council had a place in the actions that are required going forward. That meeting in November 29th explained the history of the council, how it was formed many years ago. I found minutes and documents that were given to me that showed it was very active in the 80s for Haywood County. And so it hasn't been in recent years very active, as I mentioned, but we agreed that we wanted to form a vehicle to speak for all the clubs, because as all organizations, we're not having a full participation of active membership like we used to. People change, as well as many new members coming into the communities. So the meeting was discussing the needs. The needs that were primary were the new volunteers, how to interface with the county commissioners, but most importantly, broadband. We live in a world where communication is very effective with broadband, but if you don't have it, it can be a real encumbrance on the activities of a group. The communities specifically work with WNC communities that has oversight of many, many clubs, and they've been forming Zoom meetings and coffee talks and many other things that are important to move forward with communicating and having the group act in accordance with what the desire is of each club, which is to look out to the best interests of the communities. At that meeting in November, the community clubs overwhelmingly approved the continuation of the council to become a voice, to begin activities that would hopefully work to effectively improve communications between the county commissioners and each club. Julie Sawyer was appointed as Bill Skelton was retiring to be our main contact and to organize our meetings at the co-op. Then in January, we had a follow-up meeting to elect the officers. We found the bylaws finally. The group had not been real active, so we went through the bylaws, through the election officers. I was elected to become the president. Ann Crawford was elected to be the vice president, and we have an opening for secretary and treasurer. I'm the acting treasurer right now, which was my former position. We hold some funds, $10,000 in the council bank account that we are going to meet in our next meeting and disperse based on the intentions of all the clubs. The clubs will vote as to what the best use of these funds are. That's one purpose, but more importantly, it's to be able to speak in unison of what the community clubs need in organizing and how they can benefit from working together with the county, with the commissioners, with ourselves. We will submit a budget request, as always, in this year for the clubs to ask for some financial support. That's a normal thing that we've done and has been strongly appreciated from the clubs each year. We're all suffering from the time period of COVID and the ability to raise funds. We all have various obligations within our communities. Most importantly, we use the funds to help the community, like the food pantries and the efforts we do to support the parts of our each individual community. So it was requested at our last meeting to form a presentation like this to you to explain where our primary needs are. Broadband is that, and we want to establish that form of communication. This is the present organization you see on your screen there. And what's exciting to me is that we not only have the 6 existing community clubs, but we also have 2 new clubs in formation. We began in Sawnook about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. Gary Arrington's their president, and we began to form assistance within our community clubs. Bethel did a lot of work to help them set up their bookkeeping, and now we are going to form a club in Haywood. We're going to renovate the community of Haywood in terms of community activities. And so Alex McKay is in the early stages of that. We will be using the Folkmoot Center for the headquarters of the Haywood Community Club and integrating them into our county just like we did with Sawnook. So by the end of this year, we should have 8 community clubs rather than the 6 present ones. Some of the needs of each club is increasing membership. As we all know, we're all getting older. We're all moving on to different things in our careers, and community clubs are only effective if you have membership. Some of the clubs have better activities than others. That's where we can share best practices. We can use social and digital communication methods that are tools that are prominent in all our club activities now. Most of the 2-income families that is necessary today for people to afford housing means that it's difficult for the parents to be involved in community when they have young children. So we think the need for broadband, the need for social media communication will be an effective way to help encourage new members to join. And rural communities are typically the last to get the full utility service. I think we've seen that in the past with the basic utilities, electric, back when the electric co-ops were in motion. So what we said in our meeting, our last meeting, is what can we do along with WNC Communities? WNC Communities has probably 70 or 80 clubs they're working with, and we share those best practices. But what can we do to work with the state, to work with resources that are now available to bring broadband in? I know there's a lot of activity on a broadband committee, I've heard, and other activities in the county looking at the long term and what can happen to improve the broadband. If you're out in Pines Creek, you really are interested in getting something done. There's nothing worse than being used to good broadband and then moving to an area where you don't have it or you have it limited. So our concerns here is concerns that have been expressed not as a reflection on anybody acting out of order or not providing what's needed, to simply be a voice that the trends and concerns of the county clubs are not properly in alignment with the real activity. And what that means is we'd like to become involved in the activity. We'd like to be in some form of formal communication where the County Council of Community Clubs is the vehicle to reach the clubs from the county commissioners, from the programs that are underway. We've heard that there is a broadband plan with Governor Cooper. Monies have to be used by 2026. We've heard that the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation is also receiving money for improvements. We've heard that the county, because of the flood, has gotten a lot of attention. We all know this. And so what we want to do is to have the county council become either part of the broadband committee or in a briefing session at some point where we can understand what's really going on, and instead of having the rumor mill or the voices of people who hear things, become a direct communication back to each of the clubs. So our presentation today is not, again, to criticize anything. It's to say, how can we work together? How can the newly formed council work not only to help the clubs directly among each other, but to be a vehicle of communication in both directions. So with that, we thank you for considering our needs. We'd like to hear some feedback at the earliest point on how we can work together, how we can become that communication tool that we're talking about. Thank you.
All right. As far as the broadband, David, do you want to comment on that? Say good.
Yep.
We couldn't hear what you said.
This is a fancy one, sorry. I'll be glad to sit down with Mike and go over how they can help us with the broadband committee, or how, either way that would work out. Be glad to have any more input than we can there too, and the more people we can reach with that is be important to do. So that'll be an easy thing that we can accomplish together.
Can we set up, how often does the broadband committee meet? Once a month?
Once a month.
So could y'all have a joint meeting with the
Sure.
community club and
Correct.
stuff? And then that way, you guys will know kind of where we're at and where we need to go to. And most of y'all know the areas that need to be served anyway in the community. So, and Karen's shaking her head because I know Fines Creek needs it pretty bad. But I think the community club, a good way for y'all to maybe help that is, I know, so we have some property in another state, and they put in broadband or at our community, and I asked them when they put it in, it was just all one day they just showed up, and I'm like, wow. And I said, how did y'all figure, why did you come to this community? And he said, well, we keep track of calls when people call asking for service, and we keep track of those calls. And then when we go to provide service, we look at where people have called from the most, and that's where we run the lines. So I think when we do call and maybe we don't get anything, that you might want to just just call and let any provider know, because some of these providers are keeping track of it, and then when they do have a chance to expand, they know where to go to, because that's where they've got the most calls. So I know that's one thing I thought of when y'all were talking. So, but if your community can meet with the broadband committee, that would be good, and you'd be on the same page, because I think the rural communities are where it's needed the most, and that way you can plan and try to bring those lines in where we need them. So
Well, hopefully we can influence it in the positive way that the communities
Yes.
want. But as a minimum, at least if we're hearing the progress moving forward,
Yeah.
we can communicate and activities that the people are just guessing at today.
yeah, and I always appreciate the work the community clubs have done. I know you've helped with hunger in your communities, different things. I'm always surprised. I shouldn't be, but what all good that y'all do in the community, and it really does make an impact.
We appreciate the time today.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments they want to make? Okay, I appreciate Alex. Appreciate you bringing Hazelwood to the forefront again. I hadn't really thought about Hazelwood being but it's a community, so it's a vibrant community too. So that's a good idea. I appreciate you getting involved. But thank y'all for coming today. There's about a dozen of you, I guess, this morning, so people probably can't see, but we appreciate y'all being here. Okay, our next order of business, or the next item under administrative agency reports and presentations is number 2 is the Haywood County Park and Recreation Master Plan update. We have James Ford with McGill Associates and David Francis here to talk about the Department of Planning and Recreation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Hope everybody's doing well today. Just want to give you a little background before Jim gets started. We started working on updating our recreation master plan last year. Unfortunately, during the middle, if I were trying to get everything done, the Fred flood hit us, and so we took a pause on that to where we could focus on that. Ian was very instrumental in getting a lot of things accomplished during that time. And so it took us away from getting this ready. We wanted to have this done sooner, but it took a little bit more time than we had anticipated. So what Jim will go over this thing, and this is a guideline. There's nothing, when we talk about approving and adopting, it gives us ideas and things that we can do to use to help provide better recreation here in the county. There's some big numbers in there, but there's numbers that we can work through and how we plan to get through there. And this is a 10-year plan as well, too. Okay, Jim?
Thank you, David. Again, my name's Jim Ford. I'm from McGill Associates. I'm here with Mike Norris. And as David pointed out a year ago, we were tasked with analyzing the existing system of recreation facilities and programs, looking at what the other communities have done, and try to put together, like he said, a guide. These guides are really important for making decisions in the future. We want to collect all that important information, be able to present it to you, so when it's time to make decisions, it's all in one place. So, again, I'm going to give you a quick summary. By no means is this going to be super thorough, and I'll try not to bore you too much, but it is important information. I'll go over some of that important community input. That's where it gets a little tedious, but it's important nonetheless. We'll look at what some of those recommendations were, and I won't go through all of them. There's a lot of recommendations in there, and as a guide, it should be. And then we'll talk about where that turns into some projects. And like David said, there's going to be some talk about costs, and we'll go over that too. So we wrote this document, this guide, right? This is, like he said, a 10-year plan. So it's like having a crystal ball, or trying to, right? But really it's about collecting information, looking at standards. What have other communities done? What are people telling us in the community they'd like to see? What are the realities, and how does that turn into real action, implementable things? But largely we want to know who you are. What are your demographics, right? What do you have now? How old is it? What condition are they in? And be able to take our community input and turn it into some recommendations to improve and or add new. So it does start with a map, right? We went to all your parks. We went to the other communities. We did a full inventory of what was being provided. And you're blessed. We're all blessed to be in this county recreationally. You've got public lands like most don't. You've got well-organized communities that are serving a lot of recreational needs. And you have a county, a recreation department that is filling in the gaps and really creating the quality of life that most of us have come to appreciate in Haywood County. I've heard so many positive things. This really was a really positive experience. But right now you've got your large community park and an existing mini park that the county owns and maintains. Community engagement. I talked about, what are people telling us that they'd like to see in the county? This is where we literally went out. Of course, we followed those guidelines for safely meeting. But we did have people show up and talk to us in person. That was huge. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the marketing campaign for getting people involved, that was super important. The marketing card you see in front of you, that was passed out at businesses. Staff passed. We went around town passing that out in the different communities. You do the best you can. There was signage, there was an online presence, there was this marketing effort. But ultimately, we did have 4 drop-in meetings. We decided that drop-in format was really important. The traditional meeting where everybody gathers in one room, it wasn't working. It's COVID, right? We're all scared. So we decided to do this drop-in idea where people could come and we would just spend our time waiting for people to come, and they did. It was November 23rd. 61 folks came out and talked to us, and by no means is that all the data we got, but it was important and helped us get a perspective on what we got from our community survey. The community survey, along with what we gathered in these public meetings, will ultimately lead to some of that data that we would use to make recommendations. I'm going to go into the preference exercise activity we use during those community meetings. Why that's important is because you got to get people in and out, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. Instead of sitting through a boring talk about it and hoping people attend, you give them some images. You say, what are your preferences? And where'd we get the images? Well, that survey had been out for a little while. And so we took what we were starting to see forming in that, and then added those missing links, and then said, folks, take a vote. Here's a few stickers. Tell us your first and second place. And I'll get into this in a little more detail here. Ultimately, through those 4 meetings, we came up with a top 10 of what people were telling us, at least in the community meetings, were their favorite things or things they desired. To no surprise, natural trails, followed by pickleball. Why pickleball? Because it's trending. And anywhere you go in the country, you're going to hear about pickleball, and it was no surprise to see it here. But then there's paved trails. So you're starting to see some things emerge here about what type of recreation people are actively engaged in now and want to see more of. Camping, that was, you're in Haywood County, you've got these public lands, people are going to say camping. It's important. But that bicycle pump track came up. That was a surprise. That was in the top 5. Those other 5 there were no surprising, but ultimately you're seeing a community that has a need for outdoor open spaces and trails, walking, hiking, biking, that sort of activity. What about the survey, though? That was that other tool I mentioned. 1,600 people decided to click and look at our survey and give us input. That represented about 3% of the total population. Is 3% a lot? I've been doing this a long time. And unless you have a very controversial topic, 3 to 5% is what you hope to get. And we were right there, so that's important to know. Ultimately, were these residents that were taking the survey? The majority were, which is also very important because you have a lot of visitors here. Some of them did say they were, but ultimately it was largely residents. But where were these people specifically? We did ask that question. About 2/3 of folks were from the communities. About 1/3 said that, they were in those unincorporated areas. Age-wise, that's important. We want to look at how those age break down from the state demographer's office. We're right on line with what the community is. We do like to find out what people think is preventing them from accessing the services you're providing. And that graph, not enough time, that's never been anything other than number 1 in every survey. I think having enough time to have fun in our parks is important, and we lack that time. Recreational activities that others in their household, because remember, it was a household survey. What did they say they were doing? This is like that visual survey, the visual preference boards. Now we're finding out the same information. It's hiking, it's fitness, swimming, camping. It's those outdoor adventure type activities. Important information. How do people feel about the system and the services that you've been providing? That's important to know. Largely good. It was all positive. A few people said they didn't know, and that's nice. It's right up there with, it's not bad. Overall, how did people rate their programming? You know, it's not just about your facilities, it's about what are the things that people are participating in at your facilities. They thought that was good too. So that was good to know. If it had been the other way around, we would have had something we need to look into. Improvements that could be made. You know, you got some great parks. People are saying more trails and greenways. No different than that visual preference survey, no different than the community input people were telling us. Trails, greenways, very important to this community. And expanding open spaces. In a community with so much public land, they appreciate it, they love it, they just want to see more of it. So open spaces. More public restrooms. Well, you can't go wrong there. Picnic and sitting areas followed by lighting and facilities. What it's telling me is people appreciate what you've got. They want to use it more often. You know, more lighting and security extends the open hours. Something to consider as well. When I asked people to rank the top 5 things, you know, by what was important, you know, that could be developed in the county, and these 3 boxes here might be kind of hard for folks out there to see, but that's red, orange, and yellow. Starting at the right, there it is again. Walking, jogging trails, followed by greenway trails, followed by hiking trails, followed by biking trails. Trails are important. They're very important to the community here. And there's that open space and natural. We're getting very consistent information from the community meetings, from the visual preference survey, and through this 1,660-person survey. Followed by open areas again, those middle categories, adventure activities. Playgrounds are usually in that top 5, and this one, it's in the top 10. Picnic areas, swimming pools are always in there. Don't let that, you know, fool you. But people enjoy pools too, right? But not as much as trails, apparently. There's pickleball again. I've seen that in the last 5 years crop up, followed by those that you see there. I asked people an open-ended question just to please describe, give a narrative of you know, programs and special events they love to see here. Okay, that meant me reading a lot of input, and I tried to create what's called a word cloud. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically words that were mentioned the most are those themes and topics larger relative to the other things that came up. There's greenways again, parks, and programming. We're seeing a lot of consistency. Well, you know, Parks and Rec, the department wanted to know, they asked us to add this question about would people support additional greenways and trails? Overwhelmingly. By the time you get to this in the survey, it's no surprise. Would you be willing to pay a fee to attend an event or use a special use facility? You're sort of gauging how important is this to people. Would you be willing to pay to attend something? Overwhelmingly, again, people, they understood that these things don't come free. All that added up to a number of different recommendations. Like I said, I'm not going to go over every single recommendation, but generally speaking, I have a number of what I call general recommendations that look at your accessibility, connectivity, the design of the facilities you have here, how they're maintained, policies like land acquisition, et cetera, and a marketing plan. We added that one to this plan, which we don't always do. And the reason was during those community input sessions, a lot of people, while they knew what was in Haywood County, they didn't often know who was providing what, right? So, hey, you know, we have a playground over there. Had no idea. I'd never even been there. I think a marketing plan, just a way to reach out, either it could be a web page or some other initiative to let the folks know what you're providing would go a long way in helping explain that to people. Existing facility recommendations, again, Mike and I, we went out to these parks with staff and we looked at every piece of equipment. We looked at your fields. We have recommendations for that. And then future recommendations, why that's important. If you remember when we looked at the population, it looks like the state demographer's office is expecting the county to grow about 11% in the next 10 years. That's a pretty big jump. That's a lot of people coming. I think you're on the right track. You have a very positive user group. They appreciate the things you've provided, but you're going to need a little more. And what would it probably incorporate? I would definitely say more trails. That seems to favor, you know, all our efforts at getting community input. This plan is going to recommend that you have a new district park. What that means is, and if you plan, different park types are explained. A district park is one of those larger park types. It's more general. It explains what sort of activities would be in there. We think a district park, somewhere centrally located where we know people are going to be moving to, right? You wouldn't want to put this way out. You want to put this closer in where people are planning on moving to. And then, of course, the recommendations for those existing facilities. These recommendations were based on a number of things. We didn't just look at what people told us they liked. trails, et cetera. We also wanted to look at all those traditional activities, things like athletic fields, general picnicking, playgrounds. I told you before that's a traditionally top 10. So you look at that. You look at the trails, of course, and a number of other things. We use the Recreation Resources data, National Recreation Park Association data. We've got a lot of experience doing park systems all across the state. We put it all together to create, and I'll explain to you this in a minute. I'll show you a chart, a number of different recommendations. If you were to provide something, how many you would. It doesn't say whether you should, right? Explain what I mean. This is kind of hard for folks out there to see. You have a screen in front of you. It might be easier. But if you guys decide you want to do a softball field or a baseball field, I'm not saying you need it. The county doesn't necessarily have to provide it so long as the population has access to it. Remember what I mentioned? You had communities like Canton, et cetera, Clyde, that are offering things. You don't want to duplicate services. But if you were the sole provider of these things, I'm giving you a recommendation on how many you would need to serve the population. And if you were to provide them, how many you would need if you built what was recommended in 10 years from now. What we found was largely your other communities are filling this niche. The county is providing those quality of life type things. You've got programming that I've never seen before, like the fly tying, the hiking, et cetera. You're doing things different, and there seems to be a great relationship between what the municipalities are providing, what the public lands are providing, and then what the county is providing in the middle. Very interesting. It seems to be a very good, healthy relationship. So by no means, when you see this in the plan, is it saying you have to build all of these to meet your needs. They're being met by other providers. I talked about your existing facilities, things we would do to improve those. I'm trying to put a dollar amount to that too, because I know you want to know, well, you're saying do this, but what does it cost in today's dollars? Where those dollars come from is we design and build parks. We're using the latest cost estimates we've got. Does that mean in 5 years or 3 years it'll be the same? We know that's not true. But we do the best we can to give you the most recent information as far as costs. What are we talking about doing at Allens Creek Park? What a great park. It's got a beautiful site. A lot of people were there when we visited it 2 or 3 times. The playground could use a few improvements. It's a little dated, as far as what's being provided. Think accessibility. Think the autism spectrum. Think who are the users we have out here. Modern playgrounds are not just for able-bodied people of a certain age. They're for everybody. And so upgrades to the playground is something to look forward to. Fitness stations. It's not just kids playing. It's adults and their doctors saying, hey, you need to get out and work out more. Well, I don't have a gym and I can't afford that. Well, your park could have fitness stations. A lot of parks are doing this. A lot of communities are providing these. It's a place for you to go and not only get your steps in, but go work out on some equipment. A rock climbing boulder. Why? Because climbing is healthy and you have a community that says it's into adventure type activities, right? In a safe location here with hours and eyes on the street. My wife would be more likely to use that than go out some trail in the middle of nowhere to climb. So something interesting to add to this park. And when I found out that pickleball was so popular in Haywood County, we thought, well, heck, here's a spot right here. I believe the department's already started looking into the due diligence of what that could cost, what it would look like. But this would be an excellent location to do some pickleball. Blanche Street. So this has been updated a little bit. There's some things you can and can't do here. While this is a neat park, and it's got that residential community that has some pride in this space, there's been some improvements. I think a few more improvements would make this just a really good resource. What am I talking about? The sidewalks that aren't finished around it. Complete a walking circuit. When people say they want trails, a place to walk, almost there with this one. People are using it. There's actually little pig paths where people have gone off the sidewalk. Complete that. We formalize that. If, you do a master plan, looking at what could happen, that would include additional public input in the community around. Hey guys, what do you want to see here? You're going to see things like picnic shelter, that accessible playground. You're going to hear these things. There may be limitations. When we started this, there was a lot of flooding. This was one of those spots that got a lot of that. So we'll have to look at that in the master plan to see what the feasibility is of what can actually go here. A community garden, though, that would go a long way. The new district park. I mentioned having that somewhere centrally located. There's a number of different places that could go. Our drive-through spaces and land that, was also available. We came up with this 2.5-mile service area, right? And service areas are what we use in recreation to say, hey, this is how far people are likely to come to this park. More than likely, though, it seems to be the habit in Haywood County, people are going to be driving. And while I'd love to see a park within 10 minutes of where everyone lived, in every community, we don't, that's not really practical right now. But I think as far as a large district park goes, this is one of those locations we identified as being most likely to succeed. Also, again, we can't ignore the fact that trails, greenways, were so important to the community. We want to see future development beyond the 10 years of connections between your existing parks and your neighboring communities and schools, et cetera. Staffing. Why staffing? Because we know you have to grow. And when you grow, you're going to need additional people. We've taken a stab at a practical number of people to help improve. Your staff's fantastic, and they're doing a really good job, but they're going to need help as new things are built. We feel like a new recreation officer and at least one more person to do maintenance is in line. Your part-time, when we looked at seasonal events, et cetera, these are the staff that help make these things happen. New programming, you're going to need to be able to tap people part-time to be able to run those programs. They could be seasonal, could be summer camp type. We try to take these recommendations and divide them up in some logical time frames. I've broken it down in 5-year segments here. Does that say you have to do this? No. But we've done a lot of these plans, and we felt like this was a practical division of when you should update your playground, at what facility, et cetera. By no means, when you adopt a plan like this, are you saying you're going to definitely do anything within it. Again, it's a guide. It's to provide you information and give us, a sense of what direction should we go as a county. But in these plans, we also try to help you implement them. This is part of that implementation, break, into these 5-year segments. Cost-wise, when you look at how that goes, I'm trying to scare you now rather than later. I have no idea where in 10 years we're going to be as a country or a county or what things are going to cost. We've seen costs really change, go up and down over the last couple of years. We all have heard that on the news. But looking at the projects we're working on now, applying those costs to the improvements that I just spelled out and are spelled out in detail in the plan. Allens Creek Park, an additional $660,000. Glant Street, anywhere between 50 and 100, depending again on what that master plan says. If you decide you can do some things that may be a little bit more expensive, if all you can do is the sidewalks in the community garden, it would be the lower number. But looking at your existing facility improvements, about a little under $800,000 in today's dollars to make those changes happen. The future improvements, the things we want to see happen because we know we're growing and we know we need a district bike park. It's going to be at least a couple $1 million to see that happen. I think it needs to be largely trails, bicycling. We saw how those favored in that top 5 in both the public input from the community meetings and the survey and the visual preference. But it needs to have those types of amenities. Future greenways and trails, again, it really depends on how many you decide to do. We feel like in 10 years, and just beyond, $3 million should get you started with land acquisition, identifying, where you want to put these, what destinations you want to connect, and getting some of those built. But this plan is saying almost $6 million worth of improvements over the next 10 years and just beyond, depending on, what comes up as hot topics. If someone or some new activity happens in 5 years from now that none of us anticipate, it may not be this. But just looking at what we're recommending, today's dollars, almost $6 million. And with that, I know you have questions.
When you were developing your plan, when you were developing your plan, were you aware of the project down in Canton, the Chestnut Mountain Outdoor Park?
Yes, we were. It's actually mentioned in there, and it goes along with, you have so many other projects in your community and activities being provided. What's actually a county project versus a municipality project, et cetera. But it is mentioned in there as well.
How about the Francis? Wow, man, that thing really is coming through. How about the Francis Farm landfill?
I think that is right. So if you look at that circle, that's actually close to that circle.
That's kind of what I thought.
And I know the programming that has already happened indicates they found out people want trails and bike activities as much as we found out. So I think that's a positive direction that may actually satisfy the need for a district park. But remember, like this plan, you can't, apply for Part F monies without an updated plan. This plan could help you approach an application to get money to help that park.
The $2 million that you put for the district park, is that anticipating implementing that park at Francis Farm, the cost of doing
I
that?
think at the rudimentary level, yes. Now, if you guys decide that you need a whole lot more types of facilities there that wouldn't necessarily be something that we would guess, it could go up. Could it go down? I think you need to spend at least that much.
Is that a paved walkway, bikeway, or just
I
gravel?
think you're going to need a combination of both. Okay? You're going to need both natural surface trails. You're definitely, for accessibility reasons, going to need a paved trail, right? But don't forget, there's a lot of other things that go into these types of facilities: picnic shelters, restrooms, lighting, etc. So if you do those basic things, the walking trails, bike trails, maybe a pump track, a picnic shelter, restroom, it's going to be at least $2 million.
And I know you didn't have a great deal of people that participated in it, but it didn't appear that athletic fields and facilities were one of the top things that were
Right.
required or requested.
So while that's an equal question, like every other question in it, people told us passive, walking, outdoor adventure type activities. Did anybody mention athletics? Yes, they did. Did we ask it? Yes, we did. It didn't rank very high, though. And I think when we asked that question at the community meetings, it's, oh, well, I play ball over in this community or that community. The need for that wasn't really as high as the need for these other activities. So from a county point of view, I think, like I said at the beginning, you have this great relationship with what's being provided by the municipalities and what the counties traditionally provide, and people understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't really have any questions either. It's a good report. I think we're, and just, in my mind, I was just thinking that it seemed like there's a lot of recreation. It was more along athletic fields because your communities all had softball, baseball teams, and then we've kind of gotten away from that, I guess. And now I think the focus is on outdoor recreation and not so much athletic fields as it is the walking and hiking and biking paths. So, and that gives our young people something to do.
Right. I think after going through COVID where we weren't allowed to go outside, we sort of value being outside now more than ever. Having those open places, open spaces, and trails, they mean a lot more to us now.
Did you utilize the old master plan that we had?
We did look at the old master plan.
And so when you looked at the old master plan and compared it to this one, what was the most noticeable change? Trends.
It highlights what's trending. So I have the advantage of having done plans all across the state over the last 15 years. Pickleball wasn't really a big deal back then. Trails were always a big deal, but not to the extent they are now. And that gets to what we were just talking about, like with people being shoot in for the last 2 years. People are wanting things that they didn't want back then. It used to be recreation, and the age of our families was different too. Here we are 10, 15 years later, and we're older. We have more retirees moving here. Their interests were different. Where before it was just, the family. Now it's the evolved family and all these new people moving here.
Do you recall the date of that? What was it, 2004 when we did the previous master plan?
2006.
Yeah, it was 6.
6.
So it's still not an eligible plan to go after those grants.
Right.
So the good thing about this is while, we've moved in the right direction, now you have an eligible plan to go after grant funding.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll just add one thing. I sit on that board, direct board, and seems like our focus over the last few years has been on outdoor. The survey that we did just backs that up even more. It's more on athletic fields, but seems like we've seen this shift as the surveys pointed out. So I think it's great that our focus has been, on the outdoor, going away from other things because we're working with the municipalities with what they're doing and not trying to copy that. So I appreciate the report that you did, and looks like we're moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was, I'm always talking about I'm reading these past issues of the Mountaineer, and you see that recreation. A lot of the industries had softball teams. So like you had in Hazelwood, you had all those industries, and you just don't have that anymore like you used to. So, but when I read about that, you could really see how vibrant the community was in doing athletic type things. So, anyway, okay, our next order of business is a discussion or adjustment to the agenda, but I do not have any. Does anybody have any discussion or adjustment? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. There's 2 items on the consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions about those?
The is one that we normally make, is that correct?
Yeah, they had asked for a donation, and let's see. You want to comment on that, Bryant, or?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Could you repeat that?
The donation to the veterans group. They had sent a letter asking for that, and I think we have in the past, not recently though.
Item 2.
Yes.
Consent agenda, item 2.
I think there was a letter in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have we contributed to it in the past, and then we stopped contributing for a while?
I think, yeah, that's what we discovered when we did our research.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, end of the discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda. The first item is to request approval of an application for public school building capital fund from the North Carolina Education Lottery Funds, $185,000 to be used for construction, equipment, and installation of a playground for a 2-class room at Clyde Elementary. And we have Dr. Trevor Putnam. Welcome, Dr. Putnam.
Yes, we want to ask for application for lottery funds to fund an II classroom at Clyde Elementary. Clyde houses our most severe and profound students, both physically and mentally, and this playground would allow them greater access to outdoor activities. We have submitted plans to DPI for approval. And we've also went through the proper e-procurement and bidding process. Total for this project is $185,000. Playworld was the selected bidder, and my last count, $873,000 I think left in lottery. That was in October. Of course, I'm sure y'all have probably more accurate numbers.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
How many students do you have down there?
We have
In this particular class?
Well, it serves about 4 classrooms. It's multi-age. Those numbers fluctuate, but I would say 40 to 50 students.
Okay. Will all the students at the school be able to utilize this playground? Or, I mean, I know it's more towards this particular students.
Yeah, it will be centrally located on their campus, and so other students will be able to use it. What's unique about this particular playground, whereas on a regular playground you might use an aggregate like pea gravel, this will be a poured surface, which makes it greater mobility for those in wheelchairs, those who might use a walker. The play equipment is modified for easier access and with a landing or an offload portion to the play equipment.
School board, they're on board with all this. That's a recommendation.
Yes, sir. I wouldn't be here without it. So,
Okay, any other questions on that? I'll entertain a motion. We approve item 2 of the regular agenda.
So moved.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
You seconded it, right, Kurt?
I can, yeah. I thought
Oh,
it
you
was
did?
kind of a half and half of me and Brandon, I reckon, so.
Oh, it wasn't.
Did you say anything?
No, it's you.
Then yes, it was me.
Okay, good. We voted on that, right? Okay, all right, thanks, Dr.
all right, thank you.
Okay. You guys are trying to mess with me. Huh? Item 3 of the regular agenda is to request approval and adoption of the Haywood County Recreation Master Plan and their Community and Economic Development Director, David Francis, and Haywood County.
Need the
You
number
missed
2.
one.
Oh, that's
I think you
one, I'm
missed two.
sorry.
We
Sorry,
got to
Ira.
you. We got to you, Kevin.
I know. No. Come on up, Ira. So this is the request approval of a public health, clinical services, and social services Meals on Wheels program fee changes. Health and Human Services Director, Ira Day.
Good morning, Commissioners, and
Yeah.
thanks for having us here today. Due to changes in the Medicaid reimbursement rates, we're requesting approval that our public health patient services formula will be similar as to what we've approved for our dental service formula. Means that when there are increases in the Medicaid rate, they would automatically increase. So that the Medicaid kind of sets the floor for rate reimbursement. The other thing we're requesting is an increase in the cost of the meals provided for the Meals on Wheels program. This is for the same reason as the Medicaid rate has gone up from $725 to $770. We're increasing or asking to increase that as well. Many of our folks do get the reimbursement for Medicaid. We also have a lot of people on grants and stuff, so it won't impact them. I looked at this, one person who is not covered by some other program that would impact this rate. So, and anybody else to try and make sure that they all get the service. So those are the two things that we are requesting. Specifically as laid out, the public health patient services formula will go to current approved fee or the minimum Medicaid reimbursement rate, which is ever is currently greater. Therefore, when Medicaid rate changes, we'll change the fee.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Ira?
So what's highlighted in yellow is the only change.
That is one of two. The other one is the increase on the Meals on Wheels side from $725 to $770.
Okay.
Which is the Medicaid reimbursement rate for home-delivered meals.
Okay.
That's a phenomenal increase, you know. If you look at that trend, that's just up nearly 50% since last year.
The Medicaid rates have...
Everything's going up. Okay. I'll entertain a motion. We approve item 2 of the regular agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Thanks, Ira.
Thank you.
Okay, now number 3. Come on up, Kevin. This is the request approval and adoption of the Haywood Recreation Master Plan Community and Economic Development Director David Francis and Haywood County Recreation Advisory Board Chairman Kevin Fitzgerald. Welcome, Kevin.
Good morning, Chairman Inslee and fellow board members. It's a pleasure to be here before you. I'm following Jim Ford's presentation on the update to the Recreation and Parks Master Plan for the county. Back on March 23rd, your Recreation and Parks Advisory Board met. We reviewed the proposed changes to the master plan. Bill had worked on and went into a little more depth into those changes. And the board, Recreation and Parks Advisory Board, voted unanimously to recommend that the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed changes to the plan. And as I think was explained in the last presentation, that'll position the county to apply for Part F and other grants to help support the cost of the proposed facility additions and staffing, if you will, that the new plan put forward. I think there was a total of like $5 million. Of course, that doesn't obligate the county to anything, but it just shows what the potential cost would be. But the important part is that the having an updated plan allows us to apply for those grant monies so that the money comes in at no expense to the taxpayers in this county, and the facilities can be improved. So recommend and request that you entertain that motion to approve the changes to this plan so that we can move forward with that. And I have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Brandon, you're on that board. Did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, just a few comments. I was unable to attend the meeting, but it did pass unanimously, and then David and Ian and I sat down and went over the plan as well. It's something that probably should have been done before now, to be quite frank, since '06, since we've had the master plan. So I'm excited that we've been able to get this far and find out what the community wants, and as we done discussed and found out, it's outdoor recreation. So glad that we got something put together, and as Kevin pointed out, it's not obligating us to anything, but it will allow us with this updated plan to apply for the grants. So I'm excited about it.
Good. You have something, Tommy? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion. We approve item 3 of the regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion at all? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work, David.
Yeah, it's a great team effort. Several years ago, we were doing a work session, and we were just, what do we do recreation program, and we just talked about, going more along this outdoor, recreation type. This certainly, the master plan certainly validates, that and the need that the community sees in that as well too. This week, an outdoor economy conference that's hosted by Mountain BizWorks and Western Carolina University is over in Cherokee this week. 800 participants are over there this week, all dealing with outdoor economy. So, we are really at the forefront of what, this movement is now. We're talking about athletic fields and where we are now. And so I'm really proud of the work that Ian and the advisory board has done. I mean, they really went after this, and we went after it, and they've done really well. So I'm really very proud. So I just got one other thing I've got to do. Ryan is back there in the control room. Go Tar Heels.
Okay.
That hat looks like it came from the last time they won a national championship.
This one still has a little party paper.
Okay, our next item is item 4 of the regular agenda. Is to request approval of a budget amendment from the Register of Deeds for $275,000 to appropriate increased revenues from excise tax to cover state portion of conveyance tax paid to the North Carolina Department of Revenue. We have our Register of Deeds, Sherry Rogers. Hey, Sherry.
Yeah, good morning.
You finally got up here, didn't you? Sherry was kind of easing her way up, and she kept having to wait.
David is trying to steal my show. I felt
Yeah.
No, I think most of you understand what this is. It's basically the expense side of the excise tax, which is a tax that's paid to the state of North Carolina, and it's paid at $2 per $1,000 or $1 per $500 of the selling price of conveyance, a real estate transaction. And each year, it's just been increasing. Every year I think I've put enough in the budget, because we budget, I start my budget in like December and January, and then by June, I usually have to do a budget amendment. This year, obviously, I'm here after March, because I'm pretty much out of money in March to pay the expense side of this. So real estate has, it's been a crazy 2 years for us in the Register of Deeds. So basically, this is a revenue-driven expense that I'm having to, we're having to go up, I'm adding 275,000.
You've collected it, we're just going to give the state their part.
Yes, well, we're hoping, I'm adding enough to hopefully pay through June 30th.
Okay.
So, we will collect it.
Right, okay.
So this is, for people who don't know, this is money that is collected, $2 per thousand on every sale. Sherry collects it for the county, and then the county has to pay the state a portion of that.
Yes, I'll pay basically 50% minus a 2% administrative fee that we get to keep. So.
And you're here this
state.
time of year because there's been so many sales that you have to request a budget amendment.
It's been very difficult the last few years to estimate what I'm going to have to pay out of in this account. So it's a good thing, I guess. I will say, I was thinking it was kind of slowing down just a bit right now, which is typical in the winter, even though in the last couple of years that it has not been typical, but it has slowed down a bit. But the attorneys and realtors are telling me, no, it's not slowing down. I had an attorney tell me Thursday that he's having to turn away business because doesn't have room for the closings in his schedule in the next couple of months. So I don't know. We'll just see how it goes. But
Sherry, out of curiosity, how much did you collect last year total versus this year so far?
okay, last year my budget the revenue side was $1,405,142, and the expense side of that was $688,519. As of right now, see, I wrote that down somewhere. As of March, I've collected, well, not quite all of March, but like part of March, $1,122,908, the revenue side, and I've had to pay $550,224 to the state. And that's part of March. So we've got April, May, and June, and that's, usually busier months,
And you're expecting that to be the $275,000 additional dollars?
Yes, well, the expense side of that for this year, 22, will be $825,000 is what I'm now going to have in that budget line item.
Okay.
The expense side. Hopefully that'll cover it. It should. If not, you'll get to see me again.
I bet we will.
I don't know whether to go, really high. Or I don't know what I'm supposed to actually do. What's the correct thing? But I think this will be enough. So.
Any other questions for?
Motion we approve item 4 of the regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Okay.
We'll move to item 5, is to request a budget amendment for detention for $13,600 to appropriate contingency for increased food costs at the detention center. Welcome, Chief Haynes.
Good morning, Commissioners. What we have this morning, we bring in front of you is a requested budget amendment for $13,600 from contingency for increased food costs for the detention center. There is a conversation, and there is a new contract that will be put in place, and this will follow up on the next item as well, too, for inmate food services. But currently, this particular budget amendment is due to the daily average population of inmates and the increase we've seen in this fiscal year. And obviously, with the more inmates we have, the more it costs to feed those people. This $13,600 will give us the ability to go ahead and finish up through May 1st, when the next item we'll speak about our contract for inmate food services that will carry us into the next fiscal year will be $13,600 from contingency, and a few other budgeted dollars will take us to that point to finish up the pending bills that we will have on our estimated daily average population, which has increased markedly. We do that estimate each and every year and base a lot of our budgetary line items on estimated costs or estimated numbers. And it was around 112 was our daily average population at the start of the fiscal year. And we've settled somewhere in the 128, 131 daily average population through this fiscal year, with an estimated 136 average daily population for the next fiscal year.
Anybody have any questions for Chief Haynes on this? Okay, entertain a motion, we approve item 5.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, then moving on to the next item this is to request approval of a budget amendment for detention for $34,459 to appropriate contingency funds to cover a 30-day contract with Kimball's Food Design LLC. And approval of Kimball's Food by Design LLC. Skillet Kitchen contract to provide detention center meals from June 1st through June 30th in the amount of $34,459 to be paid from contingency funds, and approval for the county manager to execute said documentation. So go ahead, Jeff, and explain that one.
This will be, excuse me, this will be for a 30-day contract to pick up at the conclusion of the of April the 30th, starting on, through May 1st. That will take us through the through June 1st. That'll take us into the next fiscal year. The $34,000 will put the single contract will put the county on the fiscal year cycle for a multi-year contract with Kimball's Commissary Skillet Food Services that'll take care of inmate food services for the next several years. But this, unfortunately, they wanted to go ahead, and we wanted to go ahead and start on June 1st, and in order to do that, we had to do a 30-day contract as a carryover to begin the next multi-year contract, which will begin July 1st. So with that said, $34,000 or $34,459 would fulfill that specific contract.
Mr. Chairman, may I add that this is sort of a big change in operations for how we in the jail. Currently, we staff it in-house, buy groceries, and prepare food, and we have four employees that handle that. It's been a pretty big challenge keeping staff there, and I think through retirements and vacancies, it's a good time to do this because we are actually down to one full-time employee and one employee that's on light duty. So when the sheriff and I started talking about this, it was a good time to bring this up. I think overall, through the grand scheme of things, the sheriff's office will actually reduce the employees by 3. They're going to change one of the positions from a food prep person to a detention so they can supervise some of the trustees that help Kimball's deliver the meals. Overall, we should save about $60,000 a year for the first few years making this change.
So basically, we're privatizing that part of it in a way.
That is correct. And there's going to be a reduction as well, too. And it's proposed on a sliding scale of which $2.75 per meal was based on the average daily population of 139 inmates. I had previously said 139. The current cost per meal with salary and benefits is $3.49. So there'll be a savings of 73 cents per meal as well, too, with that. And we'll see that savings, just like the county manager had mentioned as well, too, along with the privatization of the positions as well, too, and with maintaining one for security purposes.
Were you all able to check out the food that they supply or talk to people that they supply food to they see the quality of it?
Went through the bid process as well, too, and have had good results in speaking to other sheriff's offices that do utilize their services. Currently, we use Kimball's as our commissary provider as well, too, as a vendor that has been a long-time vendor with the county as well, too. The other sheriff's offices seem to be very pleased with their services as well, too, from an efficiency standpoint.
Chief Haynes, do you see other counties doing this similar thing about privatizing the meals?
Yes, very much so. Very similar to how we have moved forward with a vendor on the medical inmate medical services as well, too. It seems to be a trend. Yes, sir.
And so they will staff our current facility and use the facilities that are in the jail, correct?
Yes, ma'am, exactly. We'll have one that'll be from a security standpoint, but the rest will be Kimball's employee, or Skillet Food Services employees, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
And 3 inmates.
And 3 inmates.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion. We approve item 6.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, item number 7 is to request approval of a budget amendment from the Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff's Department, for $25,537 to appropriate contingency funds for the purchase and installation of vehicle equipment for the Sheriff's Department and approval of a bid submitted by Western Carolina Communications Systems in the amount of $181,536.06 for Sheriff's Office vehicle equipment purchase and installation to be paid by $25,537 from contingency funds and $156,000 from fiscal year 2021-2022 budgeted funds, and approval for the county manager to execute all required documentations. Go ahead, Chief, you're up again.
Yes, once more. What we're requesting is this budget amendment of $25,000 to pick up basically the difference between the budgeted $156,000 that was put in place for this fiscal year. Due to supply chain issues, due to cost of equipment, this will be to upfit the 13 vehicles that were previously approved and supported by this board, to go ahead and upfit those on an average of basically a $2,000 increase per vehicle. That's what it comes down to, increasing the total cost to $181,000 from the original $156,000.
Anybody have any questions on that or comments?
What was the main increase? What was the cause of the main increase of that? I mean, is there any particular equipment?
No, we use, what they do is when they put it out, the bid package goes out for specific equipment that aligns with everything that we use, and there was a cost increase in radio equipment, in our sirens, in our computer equipment, everything that goes to outfit or upfit a vehicle across the board. There was an incremental increase to average about $2,000 per vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. We approve item 7 of the regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion at all? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, Chief Haynes.
Thank you.
Number 8 is to request approval of a budget amendment for Human Resources, $8,960 to appropriate contingency funds to pay EAN contract due to increase in background checks and other professional services. County Manager Bryant Moorhead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a product of two things. The background checks, as we hire more people, we use EAN to do those checks, but also they provide some counseling to employees. And so we've had more employees take advantage of the counseling. So we need just under $9,000 from contingency.
Anybody got any questions on that? Can we have a motion to approve item 8 of the regular agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, item number 9 is to request approval to enter negotiations with Mosley Architects of Charlotte, North Carolina for the architect engineering services for the expansion of the detention center. Bryant Moorhead. Go ahead, Bryant.
You may remember we had the presentation week before last on from Mosley and Frank Randall, Hemp Hill Randall. I think through the conversations, most are comfortable with the product that Mosley provides based on their experience through expansion, the number of jails that they've worked on in North Carolina, the design features that offer a little bit greater efficiency, and some of the maintenance issues from the design. We think that Mosley would offer a better product in the long term for Haywood County. So that's our recommendation, but it's up to the board to decide how we proceed.
Okay. And Sheriff, would you like to make a comment on any of that? On the appreciate you being here today.
Good morning, Board. The only comment that I'd really have is that I have called some sheriffs who have used both these architects, and the overall positiveness that I get from my feedback is from Mosley Architects. Nothing to take away from the other company, but people were genuinely pleased with the service that they got from Mosley. And I do know that in our research at the office that we have looked at, Mosley does good work after the sale and is there with these sheriffs. And obviously, I won't be here at the end of this thing, but it's something that the next sheriff needs to have a good product going forward, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong in a jail build. And speaking with some of these sheriffs, they were just very pleased with Mosley.
Sheriff, if you don't mind me asking, I know you were here for the presentation, but there was a distinct difference between the two companies as far as safety of the officers, as far as their design, open line of sight. One did and the other one didn't. Also, the access to the outdoor exercise area. I think there was a big difference. Could you speak to that as far as officer safety and to that?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, sir. We did see that there is distinct differences in that design build and what had been suggested between the two firms. Also, moving inmates is sometimes very dangerous. And it does seem as though in the movement that the inmates would be making from their pods to their day rooms to the outdoor facility, which now you have to have whenever that you start to have these jail bills, it does seem like the design that, at least the design that we saw, was a whole lot more safer. I'll use that terminology. Also, well, I'm certainly not a contractor, by no means, but the flat roof that was, I think, was on the Hemp Hill design, just from my perspective, it didn't appear to be what you'd probably want to suggest for that facility. There again, that was me personally.
Thank you.
Anybody got any other questions
I don't have any questions, the sheriff. I was just, out of the two firms that presented, I felt much more comfortable with Mosley because of the experience that they had in expansion of jails, which is the project that we have. And one of the other things I'd like to explain to the public is, for me, and I asked this question the other evening, was, when we initially built this jail, it was built in order to add on, and I thought it would be an easy thing just to add a pod to this. But, apparently in looking at all aspects of it, when you connect something that was built 10 years ago to something that's built now, and then you implement the new rules and regulations that the state has put in place, the connectivity of those things requires that you have some people that know what they're doing. And it was clear to me that Mosley had plenty of contact with the state in regards to in the expansion of jails and compliance with those rules. And I really liked Todd, the site manager that they would have and his knowledge, working knowledge of those things. So I feel comfortable with Mosley.
I also pointed out in the meeting the other night, as far as the maintenance issue, as far as over the duration of the life expectancy of the jail, the design, there is two distinct differences in the design. I think the sheriff pointed that out very well, but it was discussed at length the other night in the meeting, just for everybody's benefit. There is there's a huge difference in the maintenance design in the two designs. The open roof of Mosley Architects is far superior than all the roof opening lights and the other group's design features. So, you know, that in itself is a huge plus looking down the road as far as maintenance costs and trying to keep that roof from leaking and keeping all that equipment serviced. So that was a huge plus as well. I also like, I noticed Frank's not here, but is there any other information on the railroad right-of-way we discussed? And I know this is not awarding a contract. This is just to enter into some more negotiations with the group. Was there any updates on that?
Not that I'm aware of, unless something came in over the weekend. Frank has basically outlined to the railroad our opposition to their view that we don't own fee simple ownership of the property and that we're going to take. So we've sort of hit an impasse, so Frank's working on that. He had to step out and go to court for actually a notice of violation that we have issued months ago on Country Road. So he's at court with the owners there to clean up some debris that they had. So that's why he had to step out.
I would say that we, of course, had presentations from both, but Mosley did mention that there was some thoughts about our current facility and safety in that in some of their plan, so that they realized that there are some things, some small things that improved, especially with what the sheriff said, moving inmates from one, I guess, pod to the next or into the new area. So they were very aware of that. And of course, someone has asked me about how we determine what that facility is going to look like and how nice is it going to be. But the board of, I guess it's the State Board of Corrections, advises us on how that facility has to be created. So we're operating under those guidelines, and Mosley seemed very well versed in what that was. So, and like you said, this is just the beginning.
Let me add, I noticed I had talked to the county manager, Brian, I don't put you on the spot, but as far as building costs, when it gets to the point, when we get down to that point, you know, there's going to be just a few contractors that will be vetted and be able to do this project. And at that point in time, as was said the other night, we hope that some of these building expenses maybe regress. It's very possible. I would hate to think they were going to stay this high. But the contractors, it's going to be about what it's going to be, you know, either design as far as cost per square foot. Concrete, glass, steel, you know, it's all going to be driven by that, what the market rate is per square foot.
I think both architects presented the idea that they would pre-qualify the contract. It's a pretty small niche, actually. It's not like you will have bidders because it's specialized. So I would imagine, hopefully we get at least 3. That way we know there's some competition. But I would imagine that the market's going to dictate the cost, not really the design, because they're going to meet the requirements. As Commissioner Best said, that the Department of Insurance, Department of Prisons will dictate largely how it works inside. So,
one thing he did mention, or one of the folks with Moses, is that when COVID first started and some of their projects were under, you know, one of theirs came under budget, like, I don't know, $12 million under budget, was because the state had pulled their contracts back. And so contractors were scrambling for work. And so now that we are moving out of that, you know, we're approaching COVID in a different way, I guess, and people have gone back to work, that's what's driven those prices back up. The contractors are able to name their price, so to speak. So I thought that was all very interesting. It's all driven, I guess, by demand. You know, our site is very unique and specific too, and I felt that Mosley was much more confident about approaching the unique things about that site than maybe the other company was.
Yeah, and as far as the railroad right away, if we've asked them to respond and they don't respond, if I'm a property owner and I own something, respond. If they haven't responded, maybe we just need to move on, and to heck with them, because you know I don't know that they'll never use 100 feet south of that line. They might use a few feet of it to add a spur line or something if they ever need to. But I just don't. If we put them and they haven't responded, to me they're saying, well, we don't care, and so but we do care. The county cares, and we want to get this project moving. So I'm for just moving on forward like we did last time, and let them come to us and say you can't build our jail here because we might own it or we might have a claim on it. So I think they've held us up enough, and I'd like to see us move on forward with it. That's my. But anyway, and my dad used to work for the railroad, so. Yeah.
I think the idea of the design, though, is just to keep the building out of the right of way. As far as the additional parking and fencing and things like that, you know, I don't have any concern about those things being in the right of way, but that's kind of the way you have to handle the deal with those guys.
Do you? Okay. Well, okay. Go ahead.
And this will be one of the like we said, the first part of the conversation. We'll get our selection committee back, start talking with them, and the Mosley design actually just encroached about, I think, 28 feet into that 100-foot right-of-way, and it was largely the outdoor rec yard. So maybe we can just avoid that by moving it in a fashion to where we don't have that issue. And we'll just keep you abreast of what's going on. The next thing we'll do, besides getting our group together and meeting with Mosley and actually getting a true design, we'll work with our financial advisors and bond counsel to start bringing them up to speed on where we are in that process so that they understand when we're likely to have a design back, bids out, so we can then go to the LGC and approve the financing. So we have a lot of work besides what Mosley's doing in-house to navigate the debt associated with it. So we'll keep you updated as we move along.
Okay, thank you, Bryant. And people need to realize too, I mean, there were some comments at the beginning of the meeting. People got to realize that these projects take time, and you just can't dive into it like you're building a house or something. So there's a lot of moving parts, especially with the LGC. North Carolina just doesn't let public bodies just willy-nilly build stuff. So you have to follow your procedures, and it takes time.
You have Bureau of Prisons, and you also have the Department of Public Insurance. And I've said on some projects I've worked with before, that's sort of where dreams go to die, because it goes out there and you just hope you get it back in 60 or 90 days. It can really take a long time. So the ball is not entirely in our court as far as determining steps, just so people understand.
The architect that's fourth largest in the nation and does 90-some% in North Carolina, you would think they would know how to streamline that process.
They are well aware of the process and how long it takes, and I think in their timeline they presented, they have time allocated for that. So I think we're in good hands with them. And our financial advisor and bond counsel have both worked with projects with Mosley, so the relationship is there between them as well.
Okay, good.
Well, I think people also understand in the county that this has been an ongoing issue for a couple of years, and the reason it's been an ongoing issue is because we've attempted to try not to spend the money to build the jail. You know, it's not like we've avoided this issue, and there's been a lot of comments back and forth about what we should do besides building the jail. And there's been plenty of interaction with the sheriff and with us as commissioners with public comments about other things that we can do besides jail expansion. And I think we vetted those out. And that's why this has taken a little more time, because we don't want to spend the county's money if we don't have to spend the county's money on a jail. But I believe we've come to the conclusion that we have to do that at this point. So
I appreciate those comments, Commissioner Kirkpatrick. Also, you have to remember, to the public out there, we went through two of the biggest deals, I guess, with COVID and Tropical Storm Fred. And our county staff, there's just so much they can do. It's not like they haven't been, working on this and back channels, but y'all's plate's been full. Our plate's been full with COVID and Tropical Storm Fred, and no one could predict these things. They just came our way, and we had to react. But I appreciate the work that's been done. I know there's been work been done on this over the years, contrary to some other people's beliefs, and I know we've been on it. So being on the inside looking out is a little bit different than on the outside looking in. And I appreciate all the work that's been done on this.
I guess I'm the only one that's sat quiet listening to everybody. I agree with everything that's been said. Since the beginning, I've been most comfortable with Mosley because of the experience and everything that was presented. And speaking to other people, even folks outside the county, and even what the sheriff mentioned a while ago, and those guys being comfortable with Mosley, I think they're obviously the right choice. And I would just add that I'm good with it. So going back to what Tommy had mentioned earlier, too, it's a whole lot easier when you're the armchair quarterback, right? So it's easy to be on the outside looking in, saying that you'd throw the ball to a certain spot on the field when you're sitting there watching it on TV. But when you're actually sitting in a seat making those decisions, we try to make the right choice and be conservative in those choices. And as Commissioner Kirkpatrick pointed out, you don't want to spend the money foolishly if you don't have to. Initially it started out, we had a very high price, and it seems like that's come down now. But I think it's time, and we all agree to move forward. And again, that's why I feel most comfortable with Mosley.
Thank you, Mariah. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that we approve item 9 of the regular agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, that concludes the regular agenda. We'll move our next order of business is appointments, and we have our county manager, Bryant Moorhead, for the request approval of an appointment of the county manager, Bryant Moorhead, to serve on the Southwestern North Carolina Home Consortium Board of Directors. Go ahead, Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may remember that we are for the Home Consortium for Western North Carolina, and they need a representative from our county. It looks like most county managers are doing that, but if one of the commissioners would like to sit on that, that would be just fine with me as well. But I'll be glad to serve on that board of directors.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Does anybody have any questions for Brian about this? We better go ahead and vote.
I move we appoint County Manager Bryant Moorhead to serve on the Southwestern North Carolina Home Consortium Board of Directors.
I second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, it's unanimous, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
so
in
much.
like Flynn. Okay, our next order of business is a closed session. We do have one item is economic development, 143-318-11A4. I'll entertain a motion. We go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll be in closed session. We enter the chambers in the back. We return to open session. Does anyone have any other business before the board today? Okay. I'll entertain a motion. We adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Do you have something you want to say?
I do. I would like to commend Joey Webb for his work on the sound system here in the courthouse. It's wonderful.
Much better.
I think with my motion to adjourn, I'm going to ask that Brandon sing for us before we leave.
Let me practice first.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Before Brandon.